Hey T friends, today we have a very special live. Going to be joined here in a moment with Dylan from The Sweetest Do, and we're going to be talking all things fooding white tea. So if you've seen the latest video that I just put out, Dylan was kind enough to check out the video, and I'm really curious his more direct feedback that maybe we can get from him. So welcome aboard, everyone. If you are watching Dylan, I think there's a way for you to request in, and yeah, we can talk about all the nerdy things about fooding white tea. So yeah, we'll let some folks come in. Welcome to the foyer. All right, looks like Dylan's got a request, so I'm going to answer that. Let's see. My friend Jay is probably accidentally requesting to join. All right. Let's see. Okay, requested. All right, go.
All right, here we go. There it is. Wait 1 second. I gotta flip my camera a bit.
Yeah.
All right. Bada bing, bada boom. Hello, hello.
Bada bing, bada boom. Bada bing, bing. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How you doing? What time is it over there? 11?
It's 11 a.m. Yeah, so it's perfect time for me to drink tea. Do you drink tea this late at night? At midnight, is it over there?
No, because I am going to. I'm going to bed.
Yeah, quite quickly you learn that like what's sustainable and what's not. You know, you're surrounded by tea all the time, and you're like, I should not drink this all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm gonna go ahead and prep my little guy one here, but yeah, stoked to talk to you about fooding white tea today. And while I'm setting up, I just want to ask for your feedback on the video. So like tell me what you liked and maybe even tell me what you didn't like. If there was something that, you didn't quite care for, maybe we can talk about that in the video.
No, I liked it. I fucking liked it. I fucking love that video. And
awesome, man. Thank you.
Please excuse, I do curse a lot. I think one of the things that got me really out the video is it gave a very honest look at the topic of food in white, and how it's really a very recent population, because it's very, and you see it a lot. There's a lot of like people will kind of assume when a tea is popular that it's like popular because of this age-old tradition passed down. Emperor loved it. All these stories.
Yeah.
And when I moved to the white tea region, I started talking with people about it, and they were like, no, 30 years ago we were making red tea. And I was just like, oh, okay. So,
yeah, totally. I mean, what I put in the thumbnail of the video, and it just kind of became clear that this was sort of a theme for the video as I was editing it. What did it say? It says, fooding white tea, modern government project or ancient tradition. Yeah. And so there's this sort of dichotomy where, and I think we see this all over the tea world, where, of course, there's an economic initiative for a specific region, and they call upon the threads of the ancient past, and they say, how can we kind of codify sort of what's gone down in the past to present a very modern take of this while packaging it in a very old world, antiquated sort of way. And I think that's appealing on a marketing level, but we also need to, as consumers, see it as a modern phenomenon, that even though this ancient style of tea that they're saying, it might be a very new style of tea in the way that they're, I think about sheng pu'er comes to mind. It's like, how ancient is that form? Like pu'er in the name is, but like the way that they're borrowing methodology is quite, these modern techniques are quite modern. Anyway, that's a whole other topic for discussion.
I do want to throw in the Reddit pu'er modern caravan. No.
Yeah, that's like my favorite book.
Great book, and she talks about at one point, because you had China under the Cultural Revolution was destroying history, destroying culture. And then after Cultural Revolution, or in the modern day, she suspects, she theorizes that there's almost an overcorrection where now there's a lot of focus on antique and old and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think white tea. But the cool thing about white tea is white tea is fucking amazing. It's delicious. Like
Yeah.
not like some some gimmick or some strong with this. Or it's delicious, and they were able to create something amazing. That's almost the cool part too of like if you think about fooding now, this developed tea thing that everyone loves, and how new actually.
Totally. Yeah. I'm not sure who I was talking about with this the last time I was taking a trip over there, but someone just made the duh, like right over my head remark that of course white tea is the most ancient form of tea. And I was like, wait, and I was expecting some sort of like fooding Jung He like marketing spiel, but like how can a place have propriety over plucked, withered, and dried? I mean, there's sort of this romanticized idea that if nature was to make a tea, it would be white tea. Say if a leaf was to fall off a bush and dry on the ground, what style of tea would that be? It would be white tea. And more than likely, I mean, like obviously, like 100% likely, pretty much, is that that was the form of tea that was produced just out of necessity, out of just the bare like minimum of getting a dried shelf stable leaf across the finish line if you were going to store a tea. And if you were, like, say, a native person in Laos or Vietnam or Burma or Yunnan or something like that. And perhaps this is just yet again kind of what I see all over the tea world where, and I want to, not cross too many lines, but the Han majority type folks like to have propriety over and soft power over Camellia sinensis. And so to really plant that flag of the invention of white tea all the way on the eastern side of China to say, like we made white tea, it sort of takes a lot of power away from the more native regions. So I don't know, there's probably some controversy in what I just said, inevitably, but what's your take on that?
Well, I because and I'm glad this is perfect. This is one of the things I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
When I posted something about the history of white tea on my stories today, and someone commented, well, they were like, yeah, white tea is first white tea or the first type of tea because all you have to do is dry it. And I was like, I don't, I think that's an oversimplification of what white tea is. Like, yes, okay, you can take, if I took tea leaves and stuck them in the sun, they're not going to taste good. They're going to taste
Yeah,
weird,
totally.
That's not, so I think, I don't know. On the one hand, you're like, okay, putting something in the sun is natural and maybe the first. I don't know if that's true. I can see very easily cooking the leaves like you would cook vegetables, like you would cook,
Mm.
and one thing I do want to talk about with you also is this idea that like making white tea is fucking hard, and
Yeah,
and especially before technology, where you just had to rely so much on the weather, and if it was a rainy day, you're kind of asked out. Um,
totally.
yeah,
Yeah, I want to not take credit from the Fujianese folks that are developing this very specialized, very highly technical sweet style of tea, white tea. I
just
don't want
come.
to disempower them while I say that other folks have been disempowered. They deserve
Yeah,
the credit for developing um, these techniques, which advanced in compound withering and all of that's involved. And this was sort of discussed in the new white tea video on YouTube. it's a lot more complicated than just plucked, withered, dried, of course. But, in essence, it sort of started out as essentially a very controlled withering step,
Yeah.
drying
Yeah.
step. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
And one thing,
that's something I learned as I watched last season's tea. I was like, oh, this is very long, very controlled process. I mean, and different areas will there how much time they take from picked leaves to finished tea will differ. But in Geelong, it's like a month. It's a month, and a lot of that time is spent. They pile up the tea. They have white tea that is basically finished, and they could finish it, I think, but they pile it up and they let it sit together. And they let it sit like that for a week or two. And that's something I don't know too much about. But it was like, oh, this is really a long, long process.
yeah, I
Yeah.
want to learn more about that piling as well because, they were in both Fuding and Zhenghe last time. They were like, yeah, we let it sit for, we wait till the huaxiang develops, the flower
Yeah.
fragrance develops. And I was like, wow, like that's really interesting because some of them had it piled in bags and then other people had them like really like piled like almost like chopoir, like in a huge, of course not composting like that, but in a very big
Pile
pile.
out.
And it's like, it almost like kind of syncs all of the aromas together in a way. And what was coming to mind for me was, I've always advocated for brewing white tea at like boiling water temps because it doesn't go through the rolling phase. It doesn't go through Ronin where it's like you break up the cell walls, and so it releases a lot of those compounds that then hardens and dries on the exterior so that the surface area is more exposed to the brewing water, and then you get this immediate like like this steep out of it like you get with all the other teas. You have that character immediately available. With white tea, you sort of have to penetrate into the cell walls with some sort of effort on your own, whether it's time or temperature. And so I've always advocated for like boiling water or just off the boil if it's like a super fresh like silver needle or something. But then I was thinking with the piling, maybe they are sort of bringing some constituents more to the surface and making it immediately available because you can really, really, really smell that floral fragrance after it's done. And so I was wondering, yeah, I don't know, just me rambling essentially,
I
but
don't know. Yeah, and
yeah.
first of all, I actually found a scientific paper about it.
Hmm.
Um, if you Google piling step white tea, you get a scientific paper, and they talk about the piling, and they say in this paper they say that the piling steps get rid of the grassy flavor, which I think, which in the white tea region, the Qingwei, the Qingcao Wei, which
Yeah.
is something, yeah.
Yeah.
And some people have it, some people don't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that gets rid of that. Yeah, no, and so it was a crazy thing for me to realize, oh wow, this is a very long process.
Totally. Totally. I've got a few notes so that we could stay on track. But if anyone is watching here, feel free to just pop in, ask any questions. We'll probably try to scroll through and at some point and see what people have asked. And as well as if you're watching this afterwards, after we post it or whatever, you can just drop questions, tag us or whatever, and Dylan and I will answer any questions about fooding white tea to the best of our abilities. And again, it's really cool to have you on here because you live in this area. So you live in Geelong, which is just up the mountain from Fooding. And maybe we can talk about that. Like, when did you move to Geelong? And I also wanted to ask, like, are a lot of more far out satellite, like hinterland regions outside of Fooding, scrambling to identify as Fooding white tea?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh man, you nailed it. Hell yeah. Okay, so yes, I moved to Zhejiang. So I've been living in China since 2017. I spent 5 years in Huangshan. So like my go-to tea is Mao Feng, and I have a Qi here.
Hell yeah.
moved around a couple of different places, came to Geelong I've done 1 year, so I'm going to my second year of Geelong. Um, and yeah, and so Geelong is, I mean, you say up the mountain, it's it's a stone's throw from Fuding.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
like I said, 10 minutes from my house, and I'm 10 minutes on scooter, and I'm in Fuding. You know,
Oh, wow.
um,
You
yeah,
talking about
no,
like
it's
Guanyang or?
yeah. We're right next to Guanyang,
Yeah, so
right
10
next.
minutes away is Guanyang.
Yeah, 10 minutes
Cool.
away is Guanyang. Guanyang is right on that border.
Right on.
Which is crazy because that's one of the story that anyway that's yeah, another story about that. Um, and so but then and so okay, but you nailed it with that question. Okay, so but Geelong on paper is not fooding, you know.
Mm.
But I will say in the 80s they kind of like broke apart. It was like Geelong, and then they separated Geelong into Puding and Shangpu, which are on the other side. And then
Okay.
they created. Sometimes Geelong has been Puding. That's not a conversation. Another conversation.
Yeah, but then you go further and it's in Fuan, yeah? Is that right? It's on the other
Uh,
side?
then it kind of yeah. So yeah, on the other side is Fuan, which is another
Right.
great actually. Anyway,
Yeah.
but no, you nailed it. So when I got here, okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm not in Geelong. I'm not in Fuding. I'm in Geelong. What's the difference? How big is the difference? Um, Geelong people do not say they're Fuding. They
Mm.
don't. Often use the term. What they say is they are high mountain.
Right.
Uh, yeah,
Right. So I mean
and
that's really quite nice to say both Fuding Baicha and then Gaoshan Fuding Baicha as well.
yeah, or they'll just say Gaoshan Baicha. They won't even
Okay.
use Fuding.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah, which is cool because they don't, and because there is kind of a separation. There, it's that couple that are defining. I do like. I think. I think they should start using Geelong. Start using the name. Um, because I think the location is really great. Geelong is at 700 meters, uh, and so this gets into a really really complex thing. So how much of a difference is that? And so
Hmm.
that's comes down to okay. So technically it's not Fuding, and technically it's a little bit higher than some parts of Fuding, but like other parts of Fuding, not higher than that. Like so, it's not higher than all of Fuding.
Right.
And then, so what's the difference? Because okay, I do think there is a Geelong flavor, this kind of lemony creaminess. Where I think if you gave Geelong tea in blindfold, like blind taste, I could recognize it. Um, and while Geelong is next to Puding, my favorite tea maker, her fields are technically in Puding. Like she's in technically the Guanyan.
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
like yeah, it's a weird thing of like, and this is a very whole thing. It's not like where's the yeah. That's a
Yeah.
whole other conversation.
Right. There's multiple layers going on here. I mean, because you have administrative districts, you've got economic initiatives, and this is one of the things that I sort of broached, and I want to learn a lot more about this. But I was uncovering that the current general secretary, the big boss,
Yeah,
he really got his teeth cut in the administrative district city of Ningda, which encapsulates Fuding and Fuan and other areas, and like there is like big economic initiatives. It's like it's considered part of the Belt and Road Initiative sort of thing. Like you see these crazy promotional videos that like takes some of the industries in Ningda to this whole other level where like there's one of the hugest. I think they're making like special batteries for technology. There's like the whole shipyard industry is just blown up. And so you've really seen since President Xi's time, like it going from poverty, just reading up on like some of the conditions described then, it was like a pretty podunk port little town village kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it's like, like so much of China has been, yeah, facelifted a
Yeah.
bunch of times. And so you have like what is essentially Fuding white tea as sort of a brand. It's very much a brand. And so people want to get in on this kind of brand. And it would be I would imagine, a very risky sort of thing for, hinterland regions like Zhejiang to kind of create their own brand. And it's like, I've got Mr. Yang Feng's book here. He's the cultural inheritor for Zhenghe white tea. And, every time he mentions white tea, he's sure to say Zhenghe white tea. And it kind of gets obnoxious where it's just like, can we just talk about white tea instead of sort of the brand economic initiative of your specific, like, bioregion? And another thought I had is like, what if we just started talking about like, what if we split it up with cultivars? It's like, okay, well, are you using Fuwan Dabai? Are you using Fuding Dabai? Are you using Zhenghe Dabai? Maybe that's a better division for folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, God, you touch on so much. Yeah, so first of all, Geelong, if has you want to talk about that went from impoverished to developed, Geelong is the perfect picture. Because it's a mountain town. This is not people. People weren't passing through this. I talked to one, and I got to go back to his shop and do an interview with him. But I talked to one older guy who sells tea, and he was like, "Oh yeah, when we were young, we didn't even have enough pants to wear every day. There were no shoes. There was one road." And he's quite a bit older, quite older. But one of the makers that I just started buying from, he was like, "Oh yeah, when I started tea, we didn't have electricity." So Geelong has been a crazy, a perfect example of the development of Ningde.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cultivars. I think cultivars are a very interesting topic. I love talking. Let's talk about cultivars for a bit.
Okay.
Because one thing I realized when I started kind of digging through and kind of getting the white tea region is the dominance of Fuding Da Bai Hao. Watch out.
The second one.
Fuding,
Yeah. The how. Yeah.
the dominance of that one. Because you don't, you drink white tea. Because basically, like, I was drinking all these white teas, and I'm like, okay, these all kind of taste the same. You get a little bit of notes different, a little bit of notes that. And it was really when I started getting into the heirloom varietals, the Shaosaichas, and then I started getting really different notes and really different flavors and really different. And I was like, oh, because when we talk about now, it's called Gongmei Shaosaicha. That's not just one varietal. That's it's kind of a blanket term. And so, the food and something in Panxi, something in Guanyang, these are all, if they're all heirlooms, they're just all going to be called Gongmei now. But seeing all these different flavors, and I was like, oh, this is a cultivar thing. Well, this is strongly influenced by a cultivar thing. It's like going to Wuishan. If you just drink Rogue, you're not gonna get the same flavor.
No.
But yeah.
It feels like a lot of these cultivars are. It's not just a flavor aspect. It feels like mostly like a predictability in harvest and yield, as well as like moisture evaporation. Like it feels like, from what I've learned specifically about Zhenghe Dabai, is that like it is less advantaged than Fuding Dabai in terms of, not only is Zhenghe up the mountain, so like monsoon season sort of starts to hit if you're plucking, later plucking grades, and then you have to kind of contend with like more moisture in the environment. Fuding Dabai, Zhenghe Dabai doesn't have the moisture evaporation level or the quickness as Fuding Dabai. So Fuding Dabai is this like wonderful early flushing, quickly evaporating thing, and we're seeing its prevalence not just in this area, but like, I was in Sichuan, and so much in Mengding Mountain, like, where you have Ganlu and Huangya, they're just pulling out, Lao Chuan Cha and like all these other varieties that are more heritage and heirloom to put in this really predictable Fuding Da Bai that's like from all the way across the country. Um, so,
And I heard, and I remember the thought, I'm going to take off my. I heard that, I remember I was watching a video, a tea drunk, and I have to go find it. But apparently in like 2014 or something, there was a drought. Kind of 2010s, there was a drought in Fuding, and there was a lot more of heirloom cultivars then. But then drought, which like killed yield, a lot of people made that switch because the Fuding Da Bai and these new cultivars, one of the things also drought resistant. Yeah, the drought was yield was good. And then somebody else who I had I had an interesting conversation with the tea maker where some tea, so okay, every cultivar has characteristic. Rogue has that cinnamon flavor. Tia Kuan Yin has the Tia Kuan Yin Yun. Every cultivar has its characteristics, but some characteristics are easier to achieve than other characteristics. So I think one of the reasons, for example, Rogue is so popular is because it's really easy to get that flavor. And so I think also with and we were talking, because I was asking him why, because I found in Fuding they use a lot of oolong cultivars for red. And why is it really easy to get floralness, to get these complexities? So yeah, so the ease of getting an interesting, good flavor, I think is a big one too.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate the tea makers that work with these cultivars, as well as I do appreciate the the trajectory that we're on to really highlight the Southside Chas and the Gongmeis. And so for anyone watching now live or later, just a review is like, the classic four that we used to see all in a row was by Hao Yin Jin, the Silver Needles, the Bai Madan, the White Peony, Gongmei, and then Shoumei, and it was a plucking grade. It was like Yin Jin, one bud, Bai Madan, one bud, two leaves, and then of course they've added some in between that, like Mudan Wang. And Gongmei was like one bud, three leaves, and then Shoumei was sort of like one bud, three leaves, and maybe it was like not even a bud, and then oftentimes you would see that, like, this is the classic one before they changed the rules. It was like Shoumei was like sort of brown, which we can talk about here in a little bit. Sometimes it was like, seen in the official sort of graphs as like a brown Shoumei. It was like that was what you would expect out of it. But then, for reasons we can talk about here in a little bit, Gongmei got sort of taken out of meaning a plucking grade, and they said maybe because there was so much confusion around, okay, what do we call a Southside Cha? And it's not such an elegant, beautiful name, and people are sort of starting to use these heirloom non-cultivars, as I like to call them, to make any of these other plucking grades. So let's just adopt this more beautiful tribute eyebrow Gongmei name to the Southside Cha ones. And I really appreciate that that's sort of the direction that we're going with this. And what's been interesting is, I was sort of thinking like, okay, Southside Cha was this existent heirloom that's sort of like a land race and is very adapted to the environment. And I think that's true on one hand, but what I've also seen is that anytime a cultivar, like a plant, like say if it's Fuan Da Bai, which I've seen this actually, where the tea producer pointed to a yearling, like a little sapling that was just sprouting out of the ground, and since it had sexually propagated and it wasn't asexually propagated via a cutting, even though it was right under the Fuan Da Bai, and who knows which plant pollinated with, it's like they're not going to genetically inspect it and say, oh, well, this is close enough to Fuan Da Bai that we're going to consider it that. Since it's technically escaped cultivation and become feral, whatever we want to say, that was now Sasaicha slash Gome. I thought that was really interesting, where it's both and. It's basically the antithesis of asexual, genetically uniform cultivars. So
Yeah.
I like working with folks that are down to work with more maybe the finicky Salsaichas to process those, because the evaporation rates can differ. They really have to know what they're doing, and I think that's a really good litmus test for a decent producer, is if they're willing to kind of work with that and not just the the predictable cultivars.
Because also, well, because what you see also, whenever a tea gets popular, you see it in fooding. I heard about it on tea, and so if you have an area, the area is poor. So let's talk fooding, 1980s, 1990s. Some people who make tea, where you have like House A, House B, and House C. And House B makes tea. House A and C, yeah, they have some land and maybe they have some tea trees on their land. But in the spring, they pick the leaves, sell it to the maker. They sell the fresh leaves. They don't make the tea. But then, the tea gets popular. Tia Kuan Yin in the 80s or 90s, Fuding white tea in the, early 2000s, 2010. And House B starts making a bunch more money. And then House A and C, and a friend in Anxi, she told me this, House A and C, they're like, oh, I want to make money. I have tea trees. Let me start making tea. And so they start making tea as well, and they start opening businesses. And where my friend here in Fuding explained this to me. But they're not coming from. It's financial for them. It's their goal is to sell the tea to, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But this is where you get the stories, and this is where you get, oh, this tea from the maiden and the virgin monkeys, and this is, and then this,
monkeys. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
and we're going to talk about this later, because I saw another video about this. 1 year tea, 3 years medicine, 7 years treasure. This is people trying to sell their tea.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, and then what happens, because the reason we were talking about this is because now white tea prices compared to a few years ago have dropped. And I was like, are people feeling nervous? And she said, only the people who are new to tea feel nervous. Everyone else who's been in this for generations, they know tea goes up, tea goes down, trends come. Like, we're used to the ebb and flow. Only the people who are new to making tea feel nervous.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think it's really important to see the economic context. I'm trying to link back to something that he said. I'm trying to remember. But I think, yeah, it's very important to see that it's not about this like unbroken lineage and heritage of this, that, and the other. They're really just, content to go along with some of these economic initiatives to allow their households to make a bit more money, and not to demonize that, but just to see it clearly, pragmatically, for this is the main driving force behind a lot of the trends that we're seeing in the tea industry.
Tea farmers are people. This is their livelihood. This is their business. Yeah, they're gonna make tea decisions financially. If you want, Michelangelo painted apple on a commission, because yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at this comment. I don't know if you can see the whole thing. I don't know if it just cuts off, but Dylan, I feel like you've talked a lot about leaves, buds, and sticks, and not always judging a tea based on this, because you can be pleasantly surprised by a tea that people would categorize as a higher. Can you see the rest of that? I'm not sure.
I no see the rest of that either. I think it might have cut off. Abigail, I like Abigail. Hello, Abigail.
Welcome.
Abigail, me and Abigail have been emailing a bit about tea. Yeah, and so you
Well,
know,
maybe.
and so this is also, and I know this was very interesting. I wonder if I have the tea. I do have the tea next to me. Fantastic. Okay, so oh no, this is great. Okay, lovely. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about. I know the context. Sorry. Um, so this came from somebody on Reddit posted, and what had happened is they had you know, they were coming from they had gotten the, so I have this tea called the watermelon water. It's a heirloom cultivar, so a gourmet oak tree, 1 to 200 years, which is talk about. Only heirloom cultivars are going to be 1 or 200 years old. You're not going to get little like Puding Da Bai, Puding Da Hao, because they're more recent. Another conversation. Um, but you know, they'd gotten they'd gotten this old tree gourmet, and they had noticed that there was a lot of stick. You know, it was a twiggy tea. And so they posted on Reddit. They were like, you know, is this normal? Um, And Reddit actually gave a lot of great answers. Like, yes, basically, you know, this wasn't the tea, but, and they were like, yes, this can be normal. And here's an example. Here's a different old tree heirloom cultivar. You can see very twiggy.
Yeah, I've
You
been
see,
seeing these kind of brooms a lot in these areas. They'll just sort of
yeah.
wrap them up and they'll include a lot of these stems. I wonder if this is just a way for them to be like, hey, is this a super late harvest? Let's actually turn a profit off of this. And yeah, why do you think they're including so much stems? Is it like sort of a weight thing and they can maybe get a little bit more for a gin?
Well, and we can talk about a few things. There's a few. So I asked one of my.
Oh, your audio is cutting out. Can everyone hear Dylan as well? Is it just me? Maybe if folks are in the chat, they can talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
That was my phone telling me I have 20% battery, so I'm just gonna have to. Okay, it's gonna. Yeah. Okay, so I'll
You want to
figure
get a
it out.
charger?
Yeah, well, it's a spacing issue. Okay, come on. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I might just have to. I just have the. All right. There. Nope. Shit. This is, if anyone has seen my lives before, this happens in all of my lives.
We would expect nothing less. I think we're all used to it.
Yeah, this is every one of my lives. My battery's almost gonna die. I have to plug in my phone and I knock it over a bunch.
It's part of the charm of
Normal.
Swedish do. I think we're all used
It's
to
normal.
it.
I keep it real here. I keep it
No one can say
maybe too
otherwise.
real.
That's true.
All right, so I have, so my, what I think it is I think, and this is an interesting thing, heirloom cultivars, you know, these are trees. These are trees now. You know, they don't trim these.
Yeah.
And so what?
Oh, we got another freeze on your video.
Yeah.
Okay, we got you back now. Okay.
Let me back. We're good. Let me check. I also have the camera. I have a whole bunch of issues. It's insane. Anyway, all my money goes to a tea and not to a new phone.
Same.
But yeah, so they rip, and you know, once again, because these are, you know, trees and they're big, thick, the leaves are attached to stems. You know, it's not, or the leaves are attached to twigs. And so it's not a little bush that's, you know, that little of a twig. It's a twig.
Right.
Now, my friend said that it tastes better with the twigs. That you should add the twigs and it tastes better.
Yeah, some say it's sweeter. Is this sort of the feedback as well?
Sweeter. She said there's a milky texture.
Okay.
I tested it yesterday. I do not think it tastes better. I do not. I think it tastes better without the twigs. I think, you know, you hear that a lot. Every time the tea makers do something, they're like, oh yeah, it tastes better, it tastes better, it tastes better. I'm like, okay. But I think it is part of the game for heirloom oak tree. If I opened a silver needle and I saw a bunch of twigs, that would be a red flag.
Totally.
Yeah, that would be a red flag. You don't, so, because the reference points are important.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't help but look at a lot of those kind of broom sort of situations that we're seeing with a lot of the twigs and, like obviously later harvest lower leaves, as like, okay, if we rewound, say 20, 30 years ago, that is like such a cheap tea.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
now with all the sort of marketing appeal and like, gongmei and, ageability, et cetera, and where the market's going, you can't help but see almost the starry-eyed tea producers saying like, "Wow, I can actually get money for this now. It's
I
cool."
can make a million
And
dollars.
that's not to say that it's not bad. Like that actually could be actually a really great innovation. And
Right.
maybe there is something with that because essentially, when you have more material, there like especially lower leaves, you're going to have more enzymes that have transformability, and so the dramatic trajectory that it takes for aging from that point forward is going to be much greater than a very petite lower or higher plucking grade.
Yeah.
So maybe there is like a time capsule situation where the stems from those lower leaves have more transformability and are going to be like that much better, say in the 3 or the 7 years or whatever. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a good time actually to get into that. We talked a little bit the other day about Xinggong Yi. I talked about this in the video. This is the artificial aging, and you were saying that it might not be as prevalent as a lot of folks are considering. So I want to give you the floor to rap a little bit about that as well.
It's not. I'm, and I think it's a thing. It is a thing, right? And I'm not gonna say it's not on the market, but I I've tasted it, and I think I actually have some. I have some in my other room. Um, every time I ask a tea maker about it, they always kind of go. There's always kind of like a yeah, like they know of it, but they don't really like doing it. It's something they can do if it's requested,
Yeah.
and that's what they say. Someone wants, hey, I want the artificially aged tea. Sure, they can do it.
Yeah.
It's from the people I've talked to here in Geelong, in Fuding, in Diantou. Um, it is not something they do by themselves, and so
Mm. They
it's
have a
not something
specialist.
it has to be. Somebody says, okay, I want 10 pounds of aged white. They go, okay, here, and they make 10 pounds of aged white, and then you know, it's not something that they make a bunch of, keep on hand, and then they try and pass it off. Um, if the people who are passing it off as aged teas, they're in the tea shops in the cities, and they're in the, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's more
Yeah,
of like a city industry
it's more of a
situation.
city.
And
Yeah,
if we're doing our jobs right and we're in the right places and we're visiting the right kind of small micro households that are sticking to good craft, they're probably at this point in 2025 thinking like, yeah, we might have dabbled in that like when it was sort of a
yeah,
thing, but I think its big era has passed. And going back to what I was referencing before, where before Gongmei was taken out, and then you would have these graphs that explain the big four of the plucking grades: the Yinjin, the Baimudan, the Gongmei, and the Shoumei. As I was saying, it seemed like before the document came out that kind of governance said, like, let's say Gongmei out. I think that was like 2017 or whatever. You
yeah.
would see Shoumei as brown, and I was always like, what? And I think they were sort of positioning themselves to not talk about the new process, not say Xinggong Yi Bai Cha, but say
Sure.
Shoumei almost as synonymous as the aged version. And I
Mm.
think we were all to sort of superficially believe that like Fuding just had ancient piles of white tea that of various ages, and the supply wouldn't ever go out. And so I think once the gig was up, you know, how do you pivot and make this new process, white tea, marketable?
Yeah.
Because it has that, like, you know, they lost a little face because obviously it was a fake aging sort of thing. And to now sell it with your integrity intact, but you wouldn't be able to get as much money from it. I think it just became, and this is my just intuition. I haven't taken like a, you know, like
Deep
I
dive.
haven't done a
Yeah.
study on this or anything like that, but I think they just kind of pivoted, and most tea producers said we're not going to offer the fake age stuff anymore. We're just going to do Tong, you know, traditional. Do you
Well,
get that impression as well?
I also suspect, you know, the fake aged was probably really popular, was probably more popular right after the, you know, let's say 2014-ish, where, you know, white tea has just exploded in popularity. And people want this aged stuff, but like, you know, these makers haven't really been aging much, you know, because they, you know, the tea was just popular 2 or 3 years ago. And so they don't have 5, 10 year aged. And so they started, you know, making all these fake aged. But now that the tea has been popular for, you know, 15 going on 20 years, they have naturally aged 10 years. Naturally, you know, I have on the website, I have a 2013 that I was very suspicious was new style, but I took it to some makers and they're like, no, this is natural.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just been enough time where they don't need to fake it anymore, especially for show maize, which have such a high yield.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need
I
to
guess
fake it anymore.
you just have to be suspicious of the, you know, quote unquote aged tea that is very, very cheap. Because if someone's been holding on to some decent show made that is like actually aged, you're not going to pay, you know, dirt cheap prices for it. I think you're going to pay a little bit more.
I'm not sure if I agree, and I think this depends. Um, I have I have found some pretty cheap because okay, I think it depends on who. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have found, you know, I have a 2015, even the 2013, um, really not expensive, really not expensive. And I'm sure with the white tea drop, they used to probably more expensive. And this is, you know, this is from the maker, wholesale prices, you know, good relations. So once again, you go to a city shop, it's going to be a little bit different. But you know, I remember somebody else was on Discord was saying, you know, they were looking at a One River Tea, another company who does very good white tea, and they were like, you know, they have this tea cake, but it's so cheap. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, honestly, white tea can be pretty fucking affordable.
White tea can
Um,
be really cheap, yeah. It's all
it can, and
relative.
then of course, then it can be. There's a range. There's a fucking range. Um, yeah, it can be. I mean, I have some. I didn't. I mean, yeah, it can be very affordable.
Yeah,
And even with, yeah, and especially with show maize, and once again, it's a lot about the yield. I have found affordable aged show maize.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
if anyone's watching and wants to try that out, I'm sure you can go to Dylan's website and check it out. That's really cool, and it's almost like, you know, it's it's a marker of your good relations which you spoke to, but also I think they should really be holding the line, right? They should really be like,
Yeah.
no, we need to, you know, charge this amount for it. But I think that if you have good enough relations, especially with the economic situation that's going down in China right now, depending on kind of the industry, the area, and the tea producer, you can sort of work with them. A lot of people are sitting on inventory and they got bills to pay.
Yeah.
And I think we've
Yeah.
seen,
They want to move the stuff. Yeah.
yeah, they want to move
And
this stuff. So,
especially, you know, I think especially in here in Jolong, where it is, you know, this is, you know, if it's so, you know, you have fooding and then you have, and you've talked about this, Diento. And
yep,
Diento's the wholesale. And that's where all the
yep,
shops are. Most people, and,
yep,
you know, a Chinese businessman who has a tea shop in Beijing, if he's going to buy white tea, he's going to go to Diento.
yep.
Lots of fun. But I think they're the ones who are going to up the price a little bit you know, because they have a lot of foot traffic and they have retail, you go to a little more to the source. Like my friend who I get my 15 from, no one's coming up to Geelong by chance. You know, you're not strolling through Fuding and then you take a 45-minute bus to Geelong. And so I think it does help them keep the prices lower. But it also makes me think of Wuishan. Wuishan, and I don't know this for sure. I've heard through semi-reliable sources that Wuishan prices are fucking insane. And it was to the point where apparently the couple of years ago, the government kind of stepped in and was like, okay, y'all need to chill the fuck out. Like, this is they put some caps and they said you can't, and I don't know, maybe it's more for the bigger companies, but
yeah, I think you're right about this, because I've sort of been seeing this cap where I'm like, huh, this is sort of the range that they're all sort of capping out at, which is really interesting. I mean, say New Long Kong is a whole different matter, but
that's just fucking,
you know, it's
the average,
the average Zhongyuan has sort of reached this sort of level, and that's really interesting to hear that the government has stepped in. So,
from what I've heard,
you know, and I think that goes back to Fujian in general. You know, under sort of President Xi's wing, you know, as really, I think, as a whole province, really done well, and I think we saw that also, or at least my friend who's from Anhui told me that, like, you know, this isn't anything new. When Hu Jintao was president or general secretary, you know, Anhui teas really stood to benefit as well. So really interesting. Did we talk about everything we wanted to talk about with the new process white tea? For anyone curious about the fake aging and the new process white tea, what they're doing in Dylan, maybe you can jump in and just kind of confirm this. Is, to my understanding, what they're doing is sort of similar to Hongcha red tea, or what we call black tea in the West. They're abrasing the cell walls, they're breaking up the cell walls, and so that some oxidation is put in and front loaded into the tea leaves at the time of production, and so that it mimics that kind of aging trajectory where the enzymes transform and oxidize naturally, but they're doing that in a sort of advanced way that's sort of similar to red tea. I think there's a more advanced piling process, and I've actually heard of some tea producers doing the what they call the yaoqing, it's a oolong process where they actually shake up the leaves and provide a little bit more fragrance and moisture evaporation. So it seems like there's various techniques to sort of speed up this oxidative process in the beginning to mimic the well-aged versions of the natural traditional white tea. Does that check out with you, Dylan, as well?
I actually have no idea. I have no idea.
Well, I know it's good, because you're in the right place. You're speaking to the small households that, again, you know, they have a specialist that does, you know, probably in Diento or whatever, that's doing the new process.
Yeah, and apparently Fuan, from what I've heard, Fuan, they're known for doing the new process. So you gotta be careful with Fuan aged whites.
Okay, I've got a guy in Guanyang who, he, you know, I really had to lay into the Xingongyi, and I was like asking him about it, and again, it was sort of the like, oh, eye roll sort of thing that you're speaking to. But once he kind of figured out that, like, yeah, the gig's up, there's really no not talking about it with me, I'm just like, I want to like learn and just press the button, you know, so I'm pressing the button, and he was like, you know, I actually studied with the guy who, you know, came up with these methods, and he, you know, he's actually really proud to be his student. And so I'm curious, and maybe this is something that I'll do in the future, is just offer a new process white tea that I can work with him and get, and it's not, you know, going to be faked and parading around like it's X amount of years old. Maybe this is at that point in the market, we can just buy new process white tea and just say what it is, and maybe we can get those prices and not pass on like an exorbitant aged cost to the end consumer, and we can all sort of A/B test and get more educated as to what are the differences between new process white tea and traditional process white tea. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I tried to do that. I bought it because I thought my friend had some, and he was like, "No, I don't have any of that." It's like, can I get the fuck out? Like, no, but I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because he was talking about like, yeah, I studied with the guy or whatever, but then another source was, even though they're saying Xinggong Yi, which translates to new technique, white tea, it's not, they were trying to say it's not that new, and it was like made in like 100 years ago and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, sure, sure,
Well, and
sure,
so, well, this is interesting. And so this is kind of somewhat, well, we're gonna at one point we'll talk about this. Fuding was a red tea region,
yeah,
for a long time. It has a very strong red tea history,
right. They
and
got the
so
rolling machines already,
and fermentation, and they got that down. And
hmm
so I could very easily see if someone was just like, yeah, let's just do that thing we used to do. Let's just do it a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I want to kind of switch topics here. Something
sounds good.
speaking of ah, damn it, I knew that was going to happen. It'll be okay. Speaking of things, marketing, we'll say. 1 year tea, 3 years treasure, 7 years. No, 3 years medicine, 7 years treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? What have you heard about that?
Well, I mean, that's sort of that marketing slogan that I think we've all been almost, if we've gotten into tea and specifically white tea in the last, 10, 15 years, that's sort of this leading marketing slogan that it compels us into thinking more about white tea as a dimensioned tea, not just the old school, oh yeah, it's only good a year of and then it just dies. It's like, oh, there's this sort of ageability to it. And as we see a lot of this in the Chinese just culture is this sort of obsession with aging things. The orange peels, and we already sort of have that existent in the tea industry with pu'er tea. And so, how do we economically maximize and not lose some of our inventory? Um, well, we can drink it aged, and we can design it so that it's already pre-aged, and we can expect that purchases now can be more because it's potentially an investment, and so we can sit on it and we can give ourselves that guilty pleasure of just hoarding more and more tea. And so it's just on the economic level again. We have to see that there's that incentive.
Yeah.
So I really see that marketing slogan as revolutionary to some degree, to really thinking about and hammering home. And we're in this new paradigm where we talk about age white tea, so there's success in that. But also you sort of see this maybe seedier underbelly of unscrupulous marketing practices trying to push aged things again. And again, it's all up to the user. It's all up to the tea drinker. Yeah.
I think you noted it. It is, and it is marketing, and it's I think it's kind of a red flag when I see someone and they put it and they quote it like it's God. Like, oh yeah,
Totally.
after this tea becomes medicine, and I'm like, no, you're new. Um,
Yeah.
and so, but and it does kind of, and I do worry because it gives this idea that uh, this focus on old idea that OT is this long tradition that they've had, which it's really not. So there's a lot of marketing to it. But I will say, once again, living in this area, so the fooding area, Zhejiang, and the fooding area has a lot of herbs. Um, and their lifestyle diet uses a lot of Chinese herbs, and they have a lot of
Yeah.
Chinese, a lot of roots.
I'm really
And
excited. I think where you're going with this. Yeah. So yeah, this is good. Continue.
yeah, so, first of all, yeah, and tea was at some points used for medicine.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want an
And
apothecary of traditional Chinese medicine, what are you
yeah,
going to do with tea, right? How are you going to preserve tea?
yeah. And even like, you know, my friends, and so is I had a maker, my friend making friend was saying that, like, you know, when she was growing up, you know, you couldn't keep, they didn't keep a lot of tea. The tea had to be sold, and it was very expensive to keep tea, but they always still kept a little bit. And they would usually keep a little bit. I think it was the white tea even. I gotta check. They kept some tea, and I think it was white tea, for when, you know, and we're not talking like pneumonia, dying sick. We're talking, you know, they had a cold, they had a fever, and there was this idea that tea was medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, like, while I think as a whole, that whole thing is marketed, it'll, like, okay, it does fit somewhere in the culture. It's not complete bullshit. Like, okay, you took something. There's some merit to what was said.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you look in Chinese medicine, materia medica, and you got your dongguai, you got your woshowu, you got your jujube dates, you got your goji berries, you got all the different things. You're also going to have Camellia sinensis leaf,
Yeah,
and I've heard this idea as well, where it's like, what if white tea was sort of just the apothecary grade? You wouldn't want to, if you just wanted functional medicine, you don't need a beverage tea. You don't need green tea. You don't need advanced processing. You don't need a tea that you pay for more because it's like a oolong or whatever, where it's gone through all of this processing and is super fancy and boutique and et cetera, et cetera. You just need a very simple delivery of the constituents that Camellia sinensis has. And so what would you do? You would just simply dry it. Well, what style of tea is that? That's a white tea.
well,
And
you know, and they,
people are keeping white tea in their apothecary. If they're keeping those Camellia sinensis leaves in their apothecary that's just plucked with it dried, and it ages, then maybe there was sort of that, like, medicine. It's sat for a few years. I wonder if that was part of the roots of that.
yeah, and also, you know, they say that aged tea. So when fresh tea is okay, so Chinese medicine, you have, you know, heat, cold, dry, warmth, you know, damp, and you want to be in balance. So things will have heat, or things will have cold, or things will be cooling. It's complex, but, you know, fresh white tea is cooling. Um,
Yeah,
but aged white tea is warming.
yeah,
And if you know anything about the way Chinese health, warming is super important. Like, you know,
yes,
they always warm water. You know, warming
yes.
is key for health. So there
It's all
is
about
that.
the stomach chi. You don't
It's
want to
all,
put cooling stuff on like bad stomach, weak stomach chi, especially if you're old.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I will say that Geelong is a longevity town, which means they have especially high amount of people who live over 100 years old. So,
Wow.
like, yeah, so they're doing something right.
Yeah. Well, you
Yeah,
spoke to the history that they have with red tea production, black tea production, and
yeah,
you go anywhere and they're gonna serve grandma, some home cha, because
yeah,
whatever, if they're drinking shang pua or white tea or a fresh green or sort of oolong, they're like, the older folks don't really want to drink this, and so
yeah.
they'll serve them a home cha, and so that more mellowed and oxidized sort of style of tea is more beneficial for their what they consider a weaker stomach chi kind of older person. So it would make sense that the white tea cooler when it's new, and then um, not as detrimental as it ages.
And
Not as
I've
much.
also told that. So with when you're making fresh white tea, you can choose to bake it or just dry it naturally all the way. Um, Baked white tea is warmer than dried white tea.
Hmm.
Baked has warmth. So I've heard.
Right. Yeah, they talk about that with the charcoal baking a lot.
Yeah,
It's like, even if it's just a fresh year of, or like 1 to 2 to 3 years old white tea. If it was charcoal baked, they'll say, it transmutes it into something that's a more of a warmer substance rather than a cooling substance.
But I should mention, it's important, and because when I was doing tea in New York City, a lot of our customers, a lot of the regulars were in acupuncture, Chinese medicine. We would talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, red tea is warming, but like only a little. Green tea is cooling, but only a little. For example, your body is naturally already hot, and you drink red tea, you're not going to be thrown way off balance. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to like ginseng, which has a lot of heat. If your body's naturally hot and you drink ginseng, you're going to get nosebleeds. And so that's the other thing that, like, because I know some people, they overthink and they're like, oh, I have to drink. It's the winter. No. Generally, people will drink red tea in the wintertime, and it feels nice. We all know it. But it's important to keep in mind that, like, when we talk about warming and cooling, like, if you have a green tea in winter, you're not going to get sick. It's not huge, throw you off.
I think that's important. I think that's a really important distinction. I think we can go a little bit too far with the whole, hey, we learned a little bit about Chinese medicine and, green tea's cooling, whatever is warming. And, then you can sort of be Orientalist and appeal to, folks in your community. But it's really not that big of a deal. This is a really interesting discussion, I think, in the Western tea world. A lot of folks just want to flex that kind of traditional medicine knowledge. And just, how far can you really take it? I mean, there's so many folks, just like you were saying in Geelong, that live to be over 100 and they're drinking this tonic beverage, tea, like every day of their lives. So, yeah, anyway.
And I will say, I have been trying to get one of the regulars, tea drop, who I still talk with, and he's an acupuncturist. And I get him to do a live and just kind of break down the basics, heat, cold, and meridian, and because he's also a big tea drinker too, so he can kind of tie that in.
No doubt. Yeah, we've got a lot of action, a lot of engagement here with the a lot of this Chinese medicine discussion. Tea is quite mild compared to a lot of other substances. Durian, agarwood, ginseng, all much stronger. I think Camellia sinensis, if we're, especially when we're doing Gong Fu brewing, how much are we really hard extracting a lot of these stronger constituents that, we see studies for, where they might have done it with like lab rats, they might have done like some sort of extract to really produce that effect. But if we're just drinking these really quick steeps and we're doing it, 99% water, how much of an impact are we getting from that?
I follow someone on Instagram who talks about food studies a lot, and the seed oils and everything. And every now and then he goes, and just to remind you, we are not rats. Like, just because they got this result on a rat, there's similarity, but it doesn't mean we are the same.
Totally. Yeah. And it goes both ways too. It's like, when you hear the detrimental effects of, the cooling nature of green tea, but when you also hear the benefits of drinking tea, I think you also need to take that with a grain of salt, where it's like, we're not lab rats. And so when you hear, stuff about cholesterol or whatever, or weight loss or something like that, you got to take it all with a grain of salt, because, we're not lab rats.
And also there's stuff like that, especially because there's so many other things that influence. Like, okay, sure, tea with your cholesterol, but then you had fucking pork sandwich and then what's your, and tea is healthy. Tea is healthy.
Yeah.
Tea is healthy.
Totally.
And it's a part of a healthy life. It helps the mental. It is healthy. It does have benefits. Is it an elixir of life? No.
Yeah. Shout out to Stephen Water. He says he can't stay, but dropping in to say y'all are the realists. Thanks, Stephen. We love you, man.
I don't see any of these. I think it's because it's your live. I
Oh,
only
really? Oh, snap. Okay,
I
so
the app is
I need to be talking about the comments here because this is my duty. Um, yeah, I mean we've gotten a few comments. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good. I think, like you said,
Someone said, according to the Chinese zodiac, I'm a rat though for reals. Yeah, okay, yeah. So you're a rat in the Chinese zodiac, no doubt.
all these studies work for that person.
Yeah. Love you, purified peace.
Um,
Well, hey, we were talking about um in Fuan, we were talking what were we talking about? We were talking about red tea, and
yeah,
you had mentioned recently the Gong Fu Hong Chas, um, and I think that's a really cool maybe avenue in terms of sourcing that anyone, and I think you're especially advantaged in your position to bring to the Western market because they're not really common. So Dylan and I have been talking about in Northern Fujian, there's there's white tea sort of the thing, but you peel back one layer, and a lot of red teas, sort of in the mid 19th century, like 1850s. You see the advent of the sort of industry in these areas, Zhenghe and Fuan and Fuding. You see some red teas, and there's kind of the big three. There's Bailin Gongfu, right? There's one in Fuan, I think it's Tanyang Gongfu,
okay.
and there's Zhenghe Gongfu. So these are the three big Gongfu Hongchas, the red teas of this sort of like northern Fujian on the border of Zhejiang by the coast, sort of like red teas. And I think you had talked about. I'll let you just talk about it.
Yeah.
Your kind of discoveries about the Gongfu in your specific area.
Oh, fucking love it. Yeah. So yeah. So this has been my more recent thing. Um, fuck red teas first of all.
What
Uh,
did you say?
I love red teas first of all.
Yeah.
When I was in Huangshan, I fell in love with Chimen Hongchas.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, "Yeah, you're still a guy to me." Like that's, because I really got into them, and I think I turned a lot of people on to Chimens. Um, and so it's funny. So when I first moved here, I was kind of flipping through a book about Chimen, looking at the history, and because Chimen started making red tea in like the 1880s, so very recently,
Yeah, that's
and it
very
said,
recent.
yeah,
Wow.
super, and that's the
Okay.
really cool.
Actually, I want to come back to this, but yeah, continue.
Oh yeah, because I love that conversation. Um, and the cool thing about it, because it's so recent, it's very well recorded. And like, okay, yep, this guy was worked in the Fujianese government, and then they don't really know. He might have gotten kicked out. He might have gotten kicked out, and he got sent to Chimen. And then at the time, Chimen was making green tea, and he was like, "Y'all need to make red tea like they do in Bailin." And so the Chimen making was influenced
Yes.
by food.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I've heard this from Yang Feng, who, as he's in Zhenghe, he's the cultural inheritor of Zhenghe white tea, but he's also the cultural inheritor of Zhenghe Gongfu, and he's just
yeah,
putting out this book about Zhenghe Gongfu Hongcha. His red tea is so good. Man, he makes a good red tea. And he was also sort of saying like, yeah, the Zhenghe Gongfu kind of contributed to the seeding of Chimen Hongcha, maybe sort of like implying there's this sort of bridge from what's also in northern Fujian, which is Tongmu village, where where the invention of red tea happens. Sort of the bridge between the two are sort of the Gongfu, the other side of northern Fujian, where they're making these three Gongfus before Chimen Hongsha came about.
yeah. I mean, 'cause also, I mean, Bailin was on a trading route. It
Yeah.
was, and so that's the thing about Tongmu. Tongmu's in the fucking mountains. Like it's very hard for that to spread. But Bailin was on a trading route that obviously helped red tea spread and Bailin red tea spread.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but so okay. So yeah, you said that you peel back a layer. You have the white tea market, and you peel back a layer, and you get this red tea market, and it's like one layer. It's like a very thin layer
Yeah.
where like you you talk to any tea maker who's, you know, our age and above, and when you ask them what was tea like when you first started making tea, they're like, oh, I used to make red tea or
Yeah.
jasmine, which is
Yeah.
another thing we
Yeah.
and red teas was the market. Island Gongfu, Panyang, the Fuan, the Zhenghe, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So you get, and so, okay, so Fuan, Da, Bai, Hua Cha Yi,
Yeah.
Southside, all these, yeah. So all these heirloom varietals, well, the Southside were now called Gongmei, the Fuding Da Bai, I have to put that Da Bai out. Fuding Da Bai, when these were planted, they were planted for making red tea,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
Oh,
That
yeah.
timeline checks out.
That
Yeah.
timeline, again, you can, and it's so recent that you find a maker in their 40s and 50s, you just ask them, hey, when they planted this tree, what were they planting for? Oh, my uncle made red tea. Like, it's that recent. And so what
Totally.
is you get just see, you know, these people right now, the market is leaning toward white tea. A lot of great white teas, but if you ask them for a red tea, a lot of them have, or a good number of them, really good red teas. I have had some fantastic red teas here. So full of flavor, so full, so fresh. You know, I just posted before this live, you know, I have a main shop that I go to here, and I love taking red teas to her
Mm.
because she's been making red teas since she was young. I take Chiman red teas to her, and I take Huangshan red teas. And she has this cool way of like, at the one hand, there's flavors that she's never really seen in red teas before, but at the same time, her knowledge of red teas, like she tasted my old tree Huangshan the other day, and she was like, "This is good, but it was too dry. The making environment was too dry." And
Wow.
she just has a level of like, and I tasted it, and I was like, "Ooh, I can taste it. I know it." And now when I taste
Mm.
that, I'm like, "That's just from dry weather."
Mm. Now, does that contribute to, like, she was able to perceive that it was dry weather? Was that equating to a dry sort of mouthfeel? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of dry, but not like flaw dry, but like almost a little bit flat. I'll send you some. I'll send you some, and you'll taste
Sounds
it.
good. Sounds
Where
good.
like a really good red tea is very full and very fresh and very bright. This one is good, a lot of good flavors, but there is a little bit of dry, just a little bit of. That's the best way to. A little bit of in
Yeah. Yeah.
something, you know, as opposed to her, you know, the red teas, they're much rounder and sweeter. Even the more simple flavors, you can just taste the quality in making.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so
man. I
this
think
is
I think the reds around that area are a really good kind of deeper dive, like one layer back for a lot of folks who are interested in that. And I think it also presents a affordable version because it's not Jinjin Mei, it's not it's these flashier reds. Sometimes you even get more expensive reds in Chimen, depending on the garden grade or whatever. But these Gong Fus I think are going to be very agreeable, like sessionable, affordable reds that have a verifiable, really like pretty deep history to them, and the making is going to be, if you get the right person, it's going to be pretty good. I think we should be highlighting these big threes. Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, you should. Yeah, Bailing Gong Fu. I think you should source it if you haven't already, and then check out the other one, that Tanyang Gong Fu. That's in Fuan. I think.
I have
Yeah,
some.
yeah.
Uh,
So
oh my God, that's great. I will say, okay, because I obviously, yeah, when I read that in the book, I was like, okay, Bylin, and I talked to someone. Bylin red teas recently aren't good. They're not great.
okay.
You know, because the market's not there. You know, the white tea. You go to Bylin, and you're going to find them making a lot of white teas. Um, you know, and I have some on hand, and I know some people. You're right. But I don't know. Maybe I can do it in a box. It's just I never found a Bylin Gong Fu. I was just like, yeah, this.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, maybe
was the
there's just so
most
much static with the because Bailin is in the core production sort of area, like the major fooding white tea production, where it's like it's right down the road from Diento, and so it's really caught up in the static of like this craze to produce white tea, and so you might just have maybe a little bit of a harder time now that I think about it. Yeah, in Bailin.
yeah. And Bylin's. Have you ever been to Bylin? You ever been?
I haven't spent much time. I've passed through it.
It's not great. It's
Yeah.
It's not developed. Not developed, even though it's right outside Fuding City. It's right
Yeah.
outside, so it's in Fuding, but it's outside Fuding City. The difference between Fuding City and Bailin is like very clear, very. They have like one beautiful old street and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, not great.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's somebody there that's making some really boss red tea,
There's
but
gotta be. Yeah,
yeah.
and it was funny because I went to my friend in Geelong the other day, and we had some red. Because and okay, I should sell it. There's a Bailan Gong flavor. Bailan Gong is a malty, thick, rich flavor. Um, I have that has flavor really, really strong. And like once you have, from then on out, you're going to be able to recognize a Bailan Gong food. Because I was at my friend's shop here in Geelong, and I tasted her tea, and I was like, "This Bailan Gong food?" And she was like, "Holy shit, yes it is." And she said it, and I kind of missed it, but I think she said her family came from Bailan.
Mm.
There was something about an ancestor. There was something. She said something I didn't quite understand.
Mm.
But she had a connection to Bailan, and so she was taking, and when her family makes red tea, they do the Bailan Gong Fu style. Um, yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And where we got with this is just tying it all back together was, well, one of the things I was thinking of as we began this discussion about the gongfus is a lot of the cultivars that we're seeing in white tea, whether it be in Zhenghe or Fuding or wherever, they were probably developed or really got to see their first limelight with those red teas. That was likely more about, an export market.
Yeah.
It wasn't really about domestic consumption because, this is in the era where, you know, that kind of area was a big port for trading for the international kind of export black tea. And
Yeah.
so these
But now,
cultivars were developed to make those gongfu red teas that I don't think there was much of a domestic market for it. It was mostly an export sort of situation. And as well as, a lot of the white teas, the earlier white teas were for export as well. Um,
and,
go ahead.
yeah, two things. So first of all, a couple of things. Yeah. So this is something I need to ask more questions about. But up until the 80s, Fuding white tea was only produced by the state. Was produced by state and then exported.
That
Um,
makes sense.
I need to ask if that was like. I think the vibe was, and I think the vibe was once again in Chinese, so I get the gist, but I think the details. Um, I think the vibe was that yeah, there was just no domestic market for white tea. Um, and even yeah, and so go back to Chimen. So okay, this guy goes from Fujian and he goes to Chimen, and he's like, hey, y'all need to, because this is 1880s. We're talking mid Opium Wars. Um, Chinese economy and government is falling apart, and there's not a great domestic market for tea, green teas even. And so this guy was like, "Yo, y'all need to make red tea um, for the export." And originally the Chiman people were like, "No, we don't make red tea. This is Huangshan. We make green teas."
Right.
And like another guy who was like, "Okay, I'll do it." And so like two fathers of Chiman red tea. One of the guy who brought it up, and the other guy who was like the first one start doing it and the first one to convince people to take it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also in Jungho, I'm sure you know, I'm sure you have Shiki and White.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting trajectory, when you're seeing the accidental invention of red tea in Tongmuguan. What was that in this? Not the 1600s, probably the 1700s. Yeah, I think that's when they're trying to say.
Something like
And
that.
then you get to the Gongfus, and then you get to the Cheeman Reds, and this kind of all grows into this export market sort of thing. And then full circle, we have in the beginning of this century, the 21st century. I think Austin Hodge of Seven Cups talks about this, where he was on a trip with some of the inventors of Jinjinmei, and they were going to Cheeman, and they were studying Cheeman Jinjin, the golden needle Cheemans or whatever, and they kind of took that back to Tongmuguan, and then all of a sudden in a few years you had Jinjinmei, where it's like this cross-pollinating that sort of comes back full circle where Tongmu eventually seeded Cheeman. Cheeman maybe seeded Jinjinmei and Tongmuguan. So, and now it's all domestic market. It's like Jinjinmei was that flagship, like domestic red that was able to demand much higher prices. Yeah. Yeah, and I even, getting a Tongmuguan Jinjinmei is just still quite pricey. And I really enjoy the Jinjinmei kind of fakes, if you will. Like Jungho Jinjinmei I actually carried last year. That was quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten into that one too much. And the ones I've tasted, I haven't gotten into that one too much. The ones I've tasted, I haven't cared for.
Mm.
But
going back to white tea, it's getting really late over there for you. I want to respect that. It's probably well past your bedtime. Yeah, and maybe one last kind of inquiry is I wanna just ask, and I think we should all kind of figure out as Western purveyors of white tea, maybe our own system of talking about these things because it's complicated, man. You got the Yinjins, you got the Baimudans, you got the Gongmeis, you got the Shomeis. You have if it's from Sao Saicha, a non-cultivar, it's considered a Gongmei, but you can then make Baimudan or Yinjin, a different plucking grade from the Gongmei, so it's a Baimudan Gongmei, and then you have all these variations with wild and half wild and ecological, and coming up with the vernacular that really I think roots the consumer, like the person reading the website or the person drinking the tea table, gives them a really good idea what the actual thing is, like where it came from and what the ecological conditions are and what the plucking grade is. It's really quite difficult. And I've struggled actually. Every time I release some white teas, I'm like, oh, I should have said this word because it actually means this. And I think getting standardized would be a good idea. And maybe even, that breaks away from the government kind of prescription of what these names are. It's really quite confusing, and yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I will say I'm very happy that I like the fact that the way Gongmei, because the line between Gongmei and Baimudan was kind of trivial, where they were like, it's a fourth leaf and not a third leaf, or the leaf is 3 centimeters, and not, it was just a very much
Yeah.
Now it's needles, silver needle, needle and bud, Baimudan, needle and leaves, Baimudan, only leaves, Shomei, boom,
Yeah.
that's great. And then you could have late picked Shomei, late picked Baimudan, and early picked.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but of course then, and I think even I've had some conversations with tea makers here, and they know the terms, but they still kind of, I think some of them are stuck in old habits. I was like, oh, so is this a Gongmei? And they're like, no. And they're like, I'm like, oh, what's the cultivar? They're like, oh, it's Shaosaicha. It's like, oh, so it's yeah. And they're like, yeah, okay. Oh, it's not a Gongmei, it's a Daye. It's a big leaf. Daye. And like, oh, what's the cultivar? Oh, Shaosaicha. Oh, so it's one of, and but that's not too big of an issue. But so I don't use the term Gongmei anymore. I I ask for shao sai cha. I ask for a little veggie. I'm
Hmm.
down. I'm down.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, it's one thing on the like working with the tea maker level, that whole vernacular, but I'm more concerned about how do we not turn people off with the kind of just intellectualized like flex of like, oh, we know that this has been changed into this, so we're now calling it this. I really just want some simpler vernacular, some more functional nomenclature on this. And even getting into the wild stuff, like
yeah.
my tea maker in Panchi, it's like he's not even saying Lao Song, right? It's like even though it's Old Bush 40, 50, 60 years old, he's saying Huang Ye. He's saying wild. And I'm like, it's just a kind of an overgrown plantation. And then he's got the half wilds,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh man, this is getting like
Yeah,
really
the show.
confusing. And it doesn't
Yeah.
quite translate very easily. So
And
yeah.
it's yeah. Yes. And it's funny because you have those. I remember I had a video, and I wish I could. Maybe I still have. Where I'm standing in this field, and I'm like, okay, here, and I kind of point the camera, and there's these big, tall tea trees. This is wild tea. And then I turn like 90 degrees, and
Yeah.
like this is wild. And
It was
so like,
planted. Yeah.
yeah, this is plant wild, and it's really the same. It's coming from the same fields, the same terroir. If one of them's getting sprayed with pesticides, the other one's going to pick up on it.
Totally.
I, I have to say, recently I have been playing with less information, less of the geekier information, or just not, like I've even started playing with putting teas on the website and naming them after the flavor notes. Watermelon white, sunshine shomei. And that way, like, because that way when someone when they're looking at my list, they can get an idea of what this tea is.
Mm.
They look at a tea and they see 2015 shomei organic. They're like, I don't know what that is.
Hmm.
And then they look in the description and I'll say, oh, by the way, blah, 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 blah. And I think about wine. I think about wine a lot. The bottle of wine. And the big letters are not the details. The big letters are, grape, but usually a funny name, a picture, and then you turn the bottle, and there's the producer, the field, da 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 da. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think people can also get lost in that. No,
Yeah.
especially yeah,
Yeah. I think there's something to be said for not over intellectualizing tea. I think there's a lot
yeah,
to be satisfied with when you finally grok what's going down.
yeah,
And I'm certainly guilty of that, where I really want to understand. And we kind of spoke to this a little bit when we were on the phone the other day, where
yeah,
I don't live in China, right? And I think a lot of us that don't live in China, when we want to get closer to tea, we sort of what do we have to do? I mean, we could drink our tea, of course, but if we want to get closer to like wisdom or knowledge, we sort of we approach it like we do with many other things. We try to grab the intellectualizations of it, and we can kind of go too far with that, I think. Um, you had specifically talked about like discussing how we get our information.
yeah,
Um, yeah, and what's crazy is like, I feel like I'll have the scent in my nose in terms of like getting to the bottom of something. I've got Yang Feng's book, and I'm looking at like this one, tea historian influencer on WeChat, and I'm translating and stuff like that. And I'm all the way over here in North Carolina, and then I'll go travel in China, and all of that seems to just kind of slip away. It's like, it doesn't really matter, you're at, and you might be at the tea table, you might be at the foot of the master, you're finally in the tea mountain, you're at the thing, and then you start asking questions, and they send you like a Baidu or WeChat article on WeChat, and you're like, oh man, like
yeah,
I'm just sort of chasing after this knowledge. It's kind of insane. And so, yeah,
yeah,
I think there's a wisdom in keeping it pretty minimal and not overdoing it. But you don't want to devolve into, eventually you're going to music festivals and yoga pants, and then you're doing the smoke and mirrors, just leaving everything out, kind of marketing and enticing people with that. So there's a balance to be struck, I think.
And I will say, China, it's easy to, to learn about tea because you just go sit in a tea shop, you go sit for 2 hours, and you go, okay, bye, and you don't have to buy, you don't have to, you can spend a leisurely Saturday. And so in the West, you can't really do that. And so I remember being in the West for a while. I'm also not super academic. I'm not an academic person, but I remember going through the articles and reading them, and there is something to it. There is something to it because I talked to some people. I talked to you. I talked to Alex from One River Tea, and then you guys just know shit that I don't know, and I'm just like, oh, like that was when I knew, like, when you named the guy who in the 1980s wanted to promote tea culture in Fuding and Ningde. I kind of knew something happened in the 80s and that the government generally did it. I didn't know there was a guy. And so sometimes having that knowledge can kind of put you how about can kind of put you in a good direction. It is useful even in China.
Yeah. Yeah. And to my point, it was, because I live in a vacuum of, there's a lack of tea knowledge, sometimes it can be an overcompensation. And I think there is sort of a benefit, and there is sort of like a weird sort of flex, but there is a functionality to it. I think when I'm traveling in these areas, I feel like I can kind of cut through the bullshit and hone in on really what I want. And that's past the intellectualization. And so those are only, just markers that, sort of on the right path, but, you got to still walk the path.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know how much bandwidth you have left in terms of discussing any other things. This has been a really awesome live. I feel like everyone's been commenting. We've had an average of, a little less than a dozen, I think, folks at any given time. We've been running on an hour and a half, getting some good traction. I'm definitely going to post this to the feed, and so it'll people will be able to see it later. Again, if anyone has any questions they want to ask, or if you're watching this later, if you want to ask questions in the comments section, Dylan's probably going to go to sleep here in a little bit, and when he wakes up, he can answer questions, and I'll be awake today, of course, here on the East Coast. Do you want to finish on any sort of topic or note, Dylan?
Yeah, well, I actually, because there's something, speaking of things that you know and I don't, Taimushan. Taimushan, this is a name in white tea, but I don't know, because you've been to Taimushan, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What's the tea like? Like, I know it's it's storyline. It's the birthplace of white tea. What's the tea like over there? What's the tea? Because I haven't been yet. That's a little.
Yeah. When I first started traveling with tea, and I went to the northern Fujianese kind of areas for white tea, and like Fuding in 2019, Fuding was like so good, man. It was so freaking good. And it took me a while to really kind of tune into the specific little areas, Panchi, Guanyang, and Diento, and all that stuff. And so the way I have connections there is primarily through friends. So This is kind of like how I think it naturally evolves as a tea purveyor, is that you get more, I think a lot of Westerners at this point know this word guangxi, or connections. And so I spent less time, spending a lot of time there and going to different shops, but I got really hooked up with, via some really good friends, who are getting married this weekend. I wish I could attend. But yeah, they really helped me out in this Fuding area. And so my main way of like really getting a lot of experience points is through sort of engaging the hypothetical of working with a tea producer, whether it's from Yunnan, Fujian, or Anhui, or whatever. And I haven't found a tea maker in Taimushan that I'm like, cool, like let me actually accrue a lot of mileage tasting your tea and getting a feel for Taimushan. So I can't really talk about the tastes and the distinctions about Taimushan. So
Yeah.
I've kind of
Okay.
gotten linked more into Panchi and Guanyang, and that's sort of where I'm starting out. And I don't want to, grow beyond that too quickly. And if I can get maybe a good connection there, maybe I'll spend more time there myself and just do, the from the ground up grunt work of like going to this random place, having the conversation, and just sussing out over the course of a week or two, like the person visiting the gardens, et cetera, et cetera. But I mostly, when I was producing this episode, I wanted to visit Taimushan just in the park to create some really beautiful scenes and to also provide the sort of background story context of it
Yeah.
being the mythologized birthplace of white tea. Yeah, so
Man,
you probably have more experience tasting Taimushan just being in Geelong.
I don't know. I don't, because they're far away. Geelong, I mm, I know Geelong teas. You know,
Yeah,
Geelong is so small and out of the way. Yeah, no, it's a very different thing.
yeah. It's definitely intriguing to think about Taimushan tea because, you have the tea production area, which I'm not really sure how adjacent it is to the actual like peaks, the 900-meter like top of the mountain sort of things. But I think the tea gardens actually do go up to a pretty decent elevation, and so you have that really central core production area, around Panchi, Jiantou, Bailin, and Taimushan of that fooding epicenter, and you got some higher elevation stuff, and you've got that acclaim. Of course, there's probably also interesting, unscrupulous production techniques and pitfalls to avoid with higher price tags, but I'm sure there's some really good stuff there. Yeah,
it's kind of the problem with being in Geelong. Geelong is 45 minutes to Fooding City by
yeah,
bus.
yeah,
And like it's that limit of like it's that line of like ugh, doable, but it's a pain in the butt. It's just like
yeah.
gotta get out and yeah. But I will go. I will go before because I am gonna leave. I'm gonna leave Fooding at the end of this year. Um, Go back to somewhere a little bit bigger, a little
Yeah,
bit yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Because I was
sounds much easier to get there than a 48-hour travel extravaganza that I have to go through. So do it for
for
me.
you. Yeah, yeah. I'll get you some. I'll find you some contacts there.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
Right
but
on,
Punchy,
man.
they're better. They are the best, I think, locations in Puding.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Right on. Well, maybe this is a good point to end on. Um, yeah, thank you so much for doing this. This is
Thank
definitely
you.
not as convenient of a time for you. So really appreciate you being a trooper and sticking out this live. And I hope everyone got a lot out of this. I think there's been some good interactions here. And yeah, a lot of gratitude for everyone watching. Thank you, Dylan. Go check out Dylan's site, Sweetest Stew. He has great content. I love his lives. He just keeps it real. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And yeah,
Thank you all. I
cheers.
appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Bye.
See ya. Talk soon.